My wife left me because I was overweight. She did not slam a door, she did not scream. She simply looked at me one morning across our kitchen in Southwest Atlanta, and I watched the love drain from her eyes like water disappearing down a drain. Slow, quiet, and completely final. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode may touch a story that is still unfolding. Demarion Ashford had never been a small man. Not in high school, not in college, not in the 10 years he spent building a life inside a city that moved fast and judged faster. Atlanta had a way of sorting people, the ones who glowed and the ones who served. And Demarion had always been the kind of man who served without complaint. He worked, he sacrificed, he loved without condition. He stood 6 feet tall and carried 350 pounds on a frame that had known nothing but labor. 2 jobs, early mornings, late nights hunched over a laptop, writing code while the rest of Atlanta slept. He was not the man women pointed at in admiration when he walked into a room. He was the man who made sure the room was ready before anyone else arrived. His neighborhood in Cascade Heights was modest and familiar. The kind of block where neighbors still waved from front porches, and the smell of someone's grandmother's cooking drifted through screen doors on Sunday afternoons. Demarion had purchased his home with 2 years of disciplined saving. He had painted every room himself. He had chosen every piece of furniture with intention. This house was not just property, it was proof. And inside that proof lived Zariah Fontaine Ashford, his wife. His high school sweetheart from the same Southwest Atlanta corridors where they had both been invisible, overlooked, and quietly beautiful in the way only broken people who find each other can be. Zariah had been the girl no one noticed at Westlake High School. Quiet, heavier than, soft-spoken and overlooked, while louder, thinner girls absorbed all the attention in every hallway. Demarion had seen her immediately, not because of how she looked, but because of how she sat alone with a book pressed to her chest like it was armor, reading in a corner of the cafeteria as though the rest of the world did not exist. He had walked up to her on a Tuesday. He had made her laugh within 3 minutes. By Friday, they were inseparable. That version of Zariah, the one who understood what it meant to be judged, dismissed, and underestimated, was the woman Demarion had married. He had loved her completely. He had believed in everything she wanted to become before she decided that becoming it meant leaving him behind. He did not know it yet, standing in that kitchen on that quiet Atlanta morning, but the life he had built was already being packed into someone else's vision, and he was the only thing in it that had not been invited to stay. Demarion's older brother, Kelvin Ashford, had his mother's eyes and his father's patience, and he had been watching Zariah for months with the quiet, measured concern of a man who already knew how the story ended. Kelvin was everything Demarion was not physically. Lean, disciplined, the kind of man who ran 5 miles before sunrise and treated his body like a responsibility rather than an afterthought. But Kelvin had never once made his brother feel less than. Their bond was built on something deeper than appearance. It was built on loyalty. And loyalty, to Kelvin, meant telling the truth even when the truth burned. They were sitting in Demarion's living room on a Sunday afternoon. The television was low. The smell of food from a local Cascade Heights soul food restaurant filled the room. Demarion had eaten well and felt a particular contentment that only comes after a full plate and a slow afternoon. Kelvin was not eating. He was watching. "Brother," Kelvin said, setting down his cup with the careful precision of a man choosing his moment. "When was the last time Zariah sat down and ate dinner with you?" Demarion thought about it, really thought about it. The honest answer arrived uncomfortably fast. Weeks, maybe longer. Kelvin nodded once, as though that answer confirmed everything. "When was the last time she asked how your day went? When was the last time she looked at you the way she used to?" Demarion shifted in his seat. "You are reading too much into things. Zariah is building something real right now. Her wellness brand is growing. She is busy. That is not distance, that is focus." Kelvin looked at his brother for a long moment. "That is not focus, Demarion. That is a woman who has already made a decision and has not told you yet." The words landed softly, but they landed deep. Demarion did not argue. He changed the subject, laughed at something on the television, and refilled his plate. But later that night, After Kelvin had gone home and the house was quiet, Demarian opened Zaria's Instagram account on his phone. He scrolled for 20 minutes. Fitness events in Buckhead, wellness retreats in Midtown, networking brunches with women who looked like magazine covers and men who looked like personal training advertisements. Photo after photo of a woman fully alive, fully present, fully thriving. He appeared in none of them. Not one image, not one caption, not one tagged moment. He had been married to this woman for 6 years. They had shared a bed, a home, a dream, and a history that stretched back to high school hallways. And in her entire curated digital world, the world she had shown to 40,000 followers, he did not exist. Demarian set his phone face down on the nightstand. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. He did not sleep well that night, but he told himself it was nothing. He was good at telling himself things were nothing. He had been doing it for months. Zaria Fontaine Ashford had not always been the woman she was becoming. That was the part that made everything harder to hold. Demarian remembered exactly who she had been when he gave her his entire savings, $32,000 that represented 3 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, and meals eaten at his desk to avoid spending money at restaurants. He had handed her that check without hesitation because he believed in her, because her dream of opening a wellness boutique in Atlanta felt like their dream. Because when Zaria talked about building something that would make women feel powerful and beautiful and seen, Demarian felt like he was watching someone finally become the person they were always supposed to be. He had built her digital world from nothing: the website, the booking system, the e-commerce integration, the email marketing automation, the social media strategy that took her from 300 followers to over 40,000 in 18 months. He had done all of it after 10-hour days at his technology firm in Alpharetta, sitting at their kitchen table with cold coffee and burning eyes, building someone else's dream with his bare hands. Zaria's boutique had opened in Buckhead on a Saturday morning in May. The space was stunning: exposed brick, warm lighting, a juice bar, a small fitness studio, product displays that looked like they belonged in an upscale lifestyle magazine. It had been Demarian's design, Demarian's labor, and Demarian's financing, but it carried Zaria's name on the door. He had been proud of that. He had wanted it that way. But the woman who had whispered, "You are my foundation," into his ear at the grand opening was quietly disappearing. In her place, a new version of Zaria was being constructed, one Instagram post at a time. She lost weight rapidly, 80 pounds over the course of a year. Her body changed, her wardrobe changed, her language changed. She began speaking in the curated vocabulary of wellness influencers, using words like alignment and intentional living and toxic environments, as though she had always spoken that way. She hired a personal trainer named Tobias Graves. He was tall, athletic, and socially magnetic, the kind of man who moved through rooms and made everyone aware of his presence. He offered to train Zaria in exchange for promotional placement at the boutique. Demarian had raised one quiet concern. Zaria had dismissed it with a logic that sounded reasonable on the surface. "You cannot sell wellness if you do not represent it," she had said. "Tobias is a business decision." Demarian had accepted that. He was always accepting things he should have examined more closely. Now, Tobias appeared in her photos regularly, always professional, always appropriate, but the familiarity between them, the inside jokes, the comfortable body language, the way he spoke about her in comment sections, felt like something that had been growing in a room Demarian had not been allowed to enter. Meanwhile, Demarian remained exactly as he had always been: reliable, invisible, gaining weight instead of losing it because the stress of 2 jobs and a slowly disappearing marriage was eating him alive from the inside. He was the foundation she had built everything on, and foundations, once the building is complete, are buried underground where no one can see them. The Atlanta Wellness and Transformation Expo was held at the Georgia World Congress Center on a Friday morning in early autumn. Zaria had been preparing for it for 3 months.
Her boutique had secured a premium vendor space, and she had invested significantly in the display. Custom signage, curated product arrangements, a photo backdrop designed to be shared across social media. Demarion had bought a new suit for the occasion. He drove to a big and tall clothing store in Marietta and spent 2 hours finding something that fit his frame with dignity. The suit was dark charcoal. He had it pressed carefully the night before. He polished his shoes. He arrived that Friday morning wanting to support his wife in the way he had always supported her, quietly, completely, without asking for recognition. The convention center was overwhelming. Thousands of people moved through wide exhibition halls. The air smelled of protein supplements and eucalyptus. Every surface reflected a version of physical perfection: toned bodies in branded athletic wear, green smoothies in clear cups, banners advertising transformation programs and fitness retreats, and weight loss journeys that promised new lives for people willing to commit. Demarion walked through it all carrying 360 pounds and a pressed suit and the particular determination of a man who refuses to let his discomfort show. People stared. Some looked away quickly. Others did not bother. He heard things, fragments of sentences not intended to reach him, but delivered without the courtesy of discretion. He found Zaria at her boutique display. The setup was beautiful. She had created something genuinely impressive, and his first instinct was pride. He approached with a genuine smile. When Zaria saw him walking toward her, something moved across her face. It lasted less than 2 seconds, but Demarion had been watching this woman's face for over a decade, and he recognized what it was. It was embarrassment. She recovered quickly. She hugged him briefly, thanked him for coming, and returned immediately to a customer. He was not introduced. He was not acknowledged to the small crowd around her booth. He stood to the side, hands in his pockets, finding no natural place to belong. Tobias Graves arrived at 11 in the morning. He entered the boutique space with the casual authority of a man who considered himself the center of every room he entered. He embraced Zaria with the ease of someone who had done it hundreds of times. He lifted her slightly. She laughed. The people around them smiled as though they were witnessing something warm and right. Tobias glanced at Demarion once, a brief, dismissive acknowledgement, the kind given to furniture. For the next 2 hours, Demarion stood at the edge of his wife's world and watched her be everything she had become without him: confident, magnetic, completely at home in a space he had paid for, designed, and built. He overheard 2 women near the expo food area discussing his marriage as though it were a podcast episode. They spoke about his weight, about the mismatch, about what Tobias had apparently said regarding the state of their relationship. They laughed with the ease of people who had never considered that the subject of their conversation might be within earshot. Demarion walked out without saying goodbye. He sat in his car in the parking structure for 45 minutes. Then he drove home to Cascade Heights. And somewhere on that drive, through Atlanta traffic on a Friday afternoon, he stopped pretending.
Zaria came home at 9:17 that evening. Demarion heard her keys in the door, heard the particular energy she carried when a day had gone well. Quick footsteps, the sound of bags being set down with enthusiasm, a voice already beginning to talk before she had fully entered the room. She was describing connections she had made, opportunities that had presented themselves, the response to her display, the numbers on her Instagram following that had jumped significantly just from the day's exposure. She moved through the house with the momentum of someone who had just confirmed something important about herself. Demarion was sitting in the living room. He had not turned on the television. He had not eaten. He had simply sat in the chair closest to the window and waited. Zaria noticed his silence from across the room. Her momentum slowed. "What is wrong with you?" she asked, and there was more irritation in the question than concern. Demarion looked at her for a moment. Then he asked directly,
without preparation or softness. "Are you involved with Tobias?" The room went completely still. Zaria's face moved through several expressions in rapid sequence: surprise, anger, calculation. She did not deny it immediately, and that delay said everything that words had been carefully avoiding for months. "I have been thinking," she said, finally, sitting down across from him, not beside him, across from him, "about us, about where I am going and where you are remaining." Demarion repeated the word quietly, remaining. She continued speaking with the measured tone of someone who had rehearsed this conversation many times. She spoke about incompatibility, about different trajectories, about how she had evolved and he had not. She used words like alignment and growth and intentional living, the same language she used in her Instagram captions, and applied them to the dismantling of their marriage as though it were simply another business restructuring. Then she said the sentence that took the floor out from under him. "You are exactly the same as the day I met you, except heavier." Demarion did not respond immediately. He absorbed it, let it move through him completely. The cruelty of it was not accidental. It was precise. It was the sentence of a woman who knew exactly where to place a blade for maximum effect. He asked one more question. His voice was controlled, almost gentle. "How long have you been planning this?" "6 months," she said. "I needed the business to be stable first." He had built that business. He had funded it, designed it, coded it, and carried it through its first difficult year. And she had waited until it was stable enough to survive without him before deciding she could leave without consequence. She moved out within the month. She and Tobias posted their first couples photograph on Instagram 11 days later. The comments celebrated them as inspiration, as goals, as proof that choosing yourself leads to better things. Demarion's name appeared nowhere in their story, as usual. He sat in the house he had purchased alone, in the quiet she had left behind, and allowed himself to understand the full weight of what had just happened. The first month after Zaria left was not a breakdown, it was a disappearance. Demarion did not collapse dramatically. He did not break things or call her name into empty rooms. He simply stopped. Stopped going to work. Stopped answering his phone. Stopped opening curtains. Stopped existing in any meaningful way beyond the most basic biological requirements, and even some of those he neglected. The house in Cascade Heights, which he had once maintained with the quiet pride of a man who believed in the spaces he created, became something else entirely. Takeout containers accumulated on surfaces, clothes piled where they were dropped. The kitchen, which had once smelled like someone lived there intentionally, began to carry the particular staleness of a place where someone was merely surviving. Food became the only language he still spoke fluently. Delivery orders arrived 3 times a day. He ate without tasting. He ate past fullness and kept going, not because he was hungry, but because the act of eating was the only sensation that temporarily displaced the one underneath, the one that sounded like her voice saying, "You are exactly the same except heavier," on a loop that his mind could not seem to stop replaying. Within 6 weeks, he had gained 40 additional pounds. He passed 400 for the first time in his life and understood on some quiet level that he was not grieving his marriage anymore. He was participating in its verdict. He was becoming the man she had described. He was proving her right. Kelvin used the spare key on a Tuesday afternoon. He found his brother on the couch, in the same clothes he had worn for 4 days, surrounded by the evidence of a man surrendering. Kelvin stood in the doorway for a long moment before he spoke. When he did, his voice carried the specific quality of a man who was frightened, but refusing to let fear become panic. "Demarion," he said, "stand up." Demarion did not move. Kelvin crossed the room, moved the takeout containers off the cushion beside his brother, and sat down. He did not lecture. He did not list the ways Demarian was failing himself. He simply sat with him in the ruin of it, shoulder to shoulder, and let the silence be honest. "She was right," Demarian said eventually. His voice had lost its texture. It came out flat and used. "Nobody wants this, Kelvin. Nobody looks at this and chooses it." Kelvin turned to look at his brother directly. "Zarya was not right," he said. "Zarya was convenient. She used your heart to build her dream, and she left when the dream no longer needed the builder. That is not truth she gave you. That is justification she dressed up to look like honesty." Demarian said nothing. "You are not disgusting," Kelvin continued. "You are a man who loved someone who did not deserve the quality of love you gave her, and now you are punishing yourself for her choices. That has to stop. Today, not tomorrow, today." It was not a motivational speech. It was a boundary, and somewhere inside the fog, Demarian heard it land. Kelvin made the appointment himself. Dr. Anaya Morrow had a practice in Midtown Atlanta that specialized in trauma recovery, emotional eating disorders, and the particular kind of grief that men carry silently until it becomes a medical emergency. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building that looked out over the city skyline. On the morning Demarian finally walked through her door, Atlanta spread beneath him like proof that the world was still moving even when a person had stopped. Dr. Morrow did not begin with pleasantries. She was a black woman in her mid-40s with the kind of direct compassion that does not waste time performing warmth. It simply delivers it honestly. "You have been using food to manage emotional pain since you were a child," she told him during their second session, after she had listened without interruption for nearly an hour. "Every time someone reduced you, rejected you, or made you feel like your value was conditional, you turned to food. It was the one thing that never judged you back. And now the person you trusted most has delivered the deepest rejection you have ever experienced. So you were doing the only thing you have ever known how to do when the pain becomes unbearable." Demarian sat with that. It was not comfortable, but it was accurate in the way that only true things are, undeniable even when you wish you could argue with them. Dr. Morrow connected him with Dr. Ezekiel Osei, a physician in Decatur who approached weight management as a comprehensive medical condition rather than a character failure. Dr. Osei did not speak about willpower or discipline. He spoke about cortisol, inflammation, trauma response, sleep architecture, and the measurable physiological effects of long-term emotional stress on the human body. For the first time in his life, Demarian felt like his body was being treated as something that deserved care rather than correction. Kelvin found him a men's therapy group that met on Thursday evenings in a church hall in East Atlanta. 7 men, different ages, different stories, the same underneath, all of them carrying losses they had never been taught to name out loud. Demarian did not speak for the first 2 sessions. He listened. He heard a man named Broderick describe the exact same sensation of eating past pain and feeling nothing but numbness filled the space where feeling used to be. He heard a man named Cyrus describe rebuilding himself so slowly that for weeks he genuinely could not tell whether he was healing or simply existing at a slower pace of deterioration. But they were all still there, every Thursday, still showing up. Demarian began walking, 10 minutes the first day, around the block in Cascade Heights, past the houses he recognized, under trees that did not require anything from him. He was not exercising, he was simply choosing each day to be outside the room where the worst version of his thoughts lived. The weight began to shift, slowly, without drama. But something else shifted faster, something interior, something that had been dislodged by honesty and was now, carefully and without announcement, beginning to find its place again. He built the application at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday, in the kitchen, with cold water and the particular quiet of a house that had finally started feeling like his again, rather than the place she had left. It was not designed to become anything. It was designed to solve a single personal problem. Demarion had been working with Dr. Osei and a nutritionist named Fatima Okafor, and the process of tracking his health data across 3 separate platforms was inefficient and discouraging. He was a technology professional. He solved inefficiency, so he built a tool that consolidated everything: meal tracking, movement data, sleep quality, emotional state, and AI-generated adjustments to his wellness plan based on real pattern recognition rather than generic recommendations. He used it for himself for 2 months. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, he posted about it in an online technology community forum. He was not marketing anything. He was sharing a project, the way developers share work, plainly, without expectation. Within 72 hours, 400 people had requested access. Within 6 months, the application had 11,000 active users. Within a year, it had crossed 100,000. A technology incubator based in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward reached out about seed funding. Demarion sat across from investors in a conference room and explained what he had built. Not a weight loss application, but a sustainable health transformation platform powered by artificial intelligence and behavioral science. An Atlanta tech startup founded on the principle that genuine wellness begins with understanding yourself, not performing yourself for an audience. The investors funded it. He brought on a small team. He hired Jasmine Caldwell, a recent graduate of Spelman College, with a background in machine learning and a sharpness that reminded Demarion of what ambition looks like when it is built on substance rather than image. She became his chief technology officer. She became a close colleague. She understood what they were building and why it mattered. Meanwhile, Demarion had lost 140 pounds over 18 months. He weighed 260 pounds. He had not pursued the weight loss as a goal. He had pursued healing, and the weight loss had followed as a byproduct of a body finally being cared for without shame. He bought a new suit for the Atlanta Tech Summit, navy blue, tailored. It fit the way clothes are supposed to fit when a man is comfortable inside the body wearing them. He looked in the mirror before leaving the house and recognized himself in a way he had not in years, not because of how he looked, but because of the expression on the face looking back. There was no performance in it, no apology, no bracing for someone else's judgment, just a man ready. The Atlanta Tech Summit was held annually at the Peachtree Grand Convention Center in Midtown, the city's most prominent gathering for technology founders, investors, and innovators driving the Southeast's growing reputation as a legitimate tech corridor. Demarion arrived early. He walked through the lobby with the unhurried confidence of someone who understood exactly why he was in the room. His company was a featured sponsor. His name was in the program. His panel on health technology innovation and accessible wellness transformation was scheduled for 11 in the morning. He was reviewing his notes near the lobby's north entrance when he heard his name. It did not come from a colleague or a conference organizer. It came from a voice he had spent 18 months learning to live without. He turned. Zaria Fontaine Ashford was standing 10 feet away, and she looked like a woman who had expected the world to keep rewarding her and had recently begun receiving different information. She was thinner than the last time he had seen her, not the controlled, energized thinness of a healthy body, but something more anxious. Her skin lacked the luminosity that had characterized her transformation period. Her eyes carried a tiredness that professional makeup could soften but not eliminate. She wore an expensive ensemble that communicated effort in a way genuine confidence never requires. She was staring at Demarion with an expression that moved through several stages in the span of a few seconds: recognition, disbelief, recalibration, and then something that required more from her than she was prepared to give publicly. "Demarian," she said again, walking toward him. "Is that really you?" He waited until she reached him before responding. "Zarya," he said calmly. His heart was steady. That surprised him, but only briefly. "How are you?" She told him he looked incredible. Her voice carried the particular sweetness of someone reaching for a register they had not used in a while and finding it slightly out of tune. She asked what he was doing at the summit. He explained, briefly, without performance. His company, the growth, the funding, the panel. He watched her face as he spoke. He had spent years learning that face, and he read it clearly now. The recalculation happening in real time, the reassessment of what she had walked away from and what it had quietly become. "Maybe we could connect about potential collaboration," she said, her tone shifting toward business with the ease of someone accustomed to reframing personal desires as professional opportunities. Before Demarian could respond, Jasmine appeared at his shoulder with the easy authority of someone who belonged precisely where she was standing. "We are on in 15 minutes, she said, then acknowledged Zarya with a brief professional nod. Demarian introduced them without ceremony, his ex-wife, his chief technology officer. He watched the information land on Zarya's face. Then he turned back to her fully, and he spoke with the quietness of a man who no longer needed volume to be heard. "There is nothing left to discuss between us, Zarya. You made a clear decision based on what you valued. I respect that decision, and I have built a life that reflects what I value. Those two things do not intersect anymore." He paused for one moment, not for effect, but because the next words mattered, and he wanted them placed correctly. "I forgive you, not for your benefit, for mine. But forgiveness does not mean return. It means I am no longer carrying what you put down on your way out." He turned and walked toward the conference hall with Jasmine. He did not look back, not because he was performing indifference, but because there was genuinely nothing behind him that required his attention any longer.
The panel lasted 55 minutes. Demarian spoke about technology, about accessibility, about building systems that serve people at every starting point rather than only those who already reflect the destination. He spoke about sustainable health transformation as a human right rather than a luxury product. He spoke with the authority of someone who had lived every word before he said it publicly. The audience responded in a way that moved through him quietly, not as validation, but as confirmation. He was in the right room. He was doing the right work. He had found his way to both through the exact path he would never have chosen willingly. After the panel ended, he was approached by 3 investors, 2 media contacts, and a wellness technology firm based in Washington interested in a potential partnership. He handled each conversation with the same measured presence he had carried through the entire day, unhurried, grounded, completely himself. That evening, riding home through Atlanta in a car that was no longer a symbol of everything he could not afford to upgrade, his phone lit up with a message from Kelvin. Kelvin had seen something on social media. Zarya's boutique in Buckhead was closing. Tobias Graves had ended things and moved on publicly to someone newer and more visually aligned with his growing platform. The boutique, which had been built on the dual foundation of Zarya's personal brand and her relationship with Tobias, had not survived either departure. The Instagram following had not translated into sustainable business revenue without the content engine driving it. Kelvin's message contained words like karma and justice and the particular satisfaction of a brother who had been right long before anyone believed him. Demarian read the message once. Then he set his phone face down on the seat beside him. He did not visit her social media pages. He did not feel the surge of vindication he might have expected. He did not call anyone to share the information. He sat with it for a few moments, this news about a woman who had once been the entire architecture of his future, and what he felt was not satisfaction. It was distance, clean, honest, and complete. The woman who had told him he was exactly the same except heavier had not understood what she was saying. She had meant it as a verdict. She had delivered it as a final word on his value, but she had been wrong in the most important way a person can be wrong about another person. He was not the same. He had never been the same as the story she told about him. And the version of himself that now moved through Atlanta as a founder, as a recovering man, as someone who had been rebuilt from the inside out rather than the outside in, that version of himself had been inside him the entire time. She had not created him by leaving. She had simply gotten out of the way. Demarion Ashford drove home through the city that had always been his, past neighborhoods that knew his name, toward a house that was entirely and finally his own. He did not look back. There was nothing behind him worth the turn. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.